Hey everyone, it's Deanna again with Midwest Chicana podcast, and we have a great lineup for you today of amazing, phenomenal people here in Kansas City doing phenomenal work. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Alex Martinez and Diaslyn Top for setting this amazing group of people up for us today. And as you can see from the invite, we are working on anti-Blackness in the Latinx community. This is part of our series, and this is the Black immigrant experience. And we have two phenomenal women here that are going to be sharing their personal experiences with us, and I can't wait for everyone to hear them. So first and foremost, I want to definitely introduce our panel of guests. And Nilufar, will you go ahead and start us off with telling us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Nilufar, and I co-host and co-produce an immigrant-centric, immigrant-focused radio program on KKFI called Global Roots.
Awesome. Nyu Nyu, it's so good to see you again. Will you tell us who you are and what you do as well? Because we met recently as well at the space.
I work as a community organizer for a healthcare advocacy nonprofit called Missouri Healthcare for All. Right now we're working on Medicaid expansion. So.
Great. Thanks for being here and telling your story. Samantha, hi. Nice to meet you. This is our first time meeting, and got to see a little bit about your bio and share that, and I'm excited to hear your story as well. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Samantha, and as of right now, I work in the medical field for a lab, and I do volunteer with the Deportation Defense League Network of Kansas City and AIR-KC, which is Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation.
Will lead us right into Trinidad. Welcome back, Trinidad. How are you doing tonight?
A little hot.
If you can tell our viewers, what you do and who you are, that'd be great.
I'm one of the organizers for AIR, Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation. And we're one of the lead organizing groups on immigration issues in the Kansas City area. But there's also lots of great immigration groups in the area, and we like to really work collaboratively with all these different groups. Yeah.
I just want to thank all of you again for coming on and being amazing at letting the world here in Kansas City especially know who you are and your own personal story in regards to immigration. It is so important for all of us to be learning with you and learning about what is happening right now, especially in the Black communities. And this is just a small way that we can start learning within our communities, our Latinx communities, on how to better support you and be an ally. So with that, Trinidad, do you want to go ahead and start us off by introducing Samantha's story to us?
Sure, I'll try to let Samantha speak for herself because she's got a really great testimony. I want to give her all that time. But I would say I got to know Samantha really well starting last year in AIR. We would sometimes working with like the DDLN, which is Deportation Defense Legal Network, that when we hear of cases of people really getting abused by ICE, stuck in ICE detention, we see if we can mobilize on that. And there's often been some great success stories. So we helped to get Samantha bonded out. And that was a collaborative effort between various groups. And she's not a victim of her circumstances. She really has been empowered to not just be prey to circumstances. She's really taken control of her own destiny. And her story is really powerful, and it shows a lot about what's wrong about our immigration system right now, especially detention.
Samantha, if you'd like to go ahead and share your story, we would love to hear that testimony.
I think it's possible Samantha lost connection.
Oh, you're on mute there.
I'm doing it to myself. So we'll go ahead and wait and see if Samantha can join us again. So let's go ahead and start with Nyu Nyu. You have an amazing story, and I'm just going to read a little bit about your bio, if you don't mind, if that's okay. Okay. So you are she's an African-American immigrant from the Republic of South Sudan. She and her family came to the United States as refugees in the 90s due to civil unrest in Sudan. They eventually ended up in the historic Northeast region of Kansas City, where she would spend her formative years toiling with the concept of her identity. She came to herself as a Black woman, a Sudanese woman, a sister, a daughter, and most importantly, more than all of these things combined. So Nyu Nyu, with that, will you go ahead and tell us your...
Yeah, so we came to the United States in 1995. I was 2 years old. We actually came on my birthday. And so a lot of people with, the way I speak, just assume that I'm a Black American. Anyway, so when my family came here, it was me, my mom, and dad. And we first came to Tennessee and then finally took roots in Kansas City about around the time that I was 4 years old. I went to school in a very diverse neighborhood, and to this day, as a lot of Kansas Cityans may know, that the Northeast is still as diverse as it was back then. And so I spent those times kind of like I feel like I got the support I needed in those communities. It was until I moved to the Northland that I started to see or realize that I was Black and what it meant to be Black. Because of the reactions from my teachers and my peers, and it was very shocking and very traumatizing to me. Because when I was in the Northeast, it was so many children that were also first generation students from so many parts of the world, and then there was a lot of Latinx and like Somalian populations. We had a very few white people in that community. And so to go from there, where we didn't really talk about race, to go to a place where I was a minority, even as a person of color, just a minority in general, was very hard for me. It wasn't until about high school or in college where I really started thinking about what do I consider myself, and being Black and being as well as an immigrant. You kind of, it's like a tug between two worlds, because there's not really a place for you in either. Because like a Black American experience is one thing, and being an immigrant and having, going to a household where people are speaking different languages and have a different culture is something else as well.
So Nyu Nyu, you live in the Northland right now. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So how is everything going right now, being up here in the Northland?
I think it does make a difference. I've been involved with Alive and Well communities, and their whole thing is trying to address community traumas, and so they do that by putting together meetings based off of the counties, and so I find that I'm the only one that I have to represent Black people, and I have to represent all immigrants in that area, because the people who chose to get involved all have the luxury of having a 9-to-5 job where they can take time to meet and talk about community traumas. And so I take that very seriously, but it is a hard place to be, where I have to be the one that's always saying okay, but we have to make sure we're including Black people, we're including other people of color and immigrants in the conversation, because the things that they bring up is a very white professional perspective to community traumas. And yeah, so I'll say in terms of diversity in Platte County, there really isn't that much. In Clay County, it's a lot more diverse. But again, in terms of power and involvement in community work, there really isn't much representation for any groups of color, let alone Black people, let alone immigrants or refugees. So, yeah.
I'm totally there with you. I'm in Platte County, coming from all over the Kansas City area, KCK and KCMO, Northeast, Argentine, it's just everywhere. And I feel like up north, it's been a place where people grew up here from the very, when they were small, and continued their lives up here. And not that to say that it's all very much a clique, but there's very much so, especially in the school systems, people know each other, and they have known each other for a very, very long time. And it is very hard to immerse yourself, and especially when you're not white or from the community. It's just been, I understand that struggle completely. being Mexican American and trying to find that diverse voice, someone like us up here.
Yes, and I think it's interesting you bring up schools, because that is a really important aspect of this, because when I was I was in the North Kansas City School District and then graduated in the Park Hill School District. Even within those two schools, it was a very different experience. We had a lot more first generation kids at the North Kansas City High School, but then when I went to Park Hill, that wasn't the case. And then with our names being different, there was assumption that we didn't know English, that we needed to be in what do they call it, ESL or ELL classes.
Yes.
But also I saw that, like, especially for like my younger siblings, all of them were born in this country, and like we all know English, but we're more likely to still be put in the ELL, ESL classes no matter what. And I saw that even now, like I have little cousins who are 14 years younger than me, and that same thing was happening, which is funny because they only know English, and they're in these classes with kids who come directly from another country, who are actually speaking Arabic to each other, actually speaking Spanish, and here they are being labeled the same way, where it makes sense for children who have to learn another language, but to put children who don't have another language besides English, it's an interesting perspective, because it takes them away from like getting past the basic levels of English. I saw the kind of curriculum they were learning, and it was not what you should be for someone who is a native English speaker.
Oh my gosh, this is something I don't know if we're like the only ones that are going through this, but I have never met anyone else who has been in that same situation that I'm in. So my kids did this exact same thing. They are English born. They speak English. They are bilingual, but their main spoken word is English, and they have been in ESL since kindergarten. And I totally understand what you're saying about that, because it's very different for them than it is for people that are not, first language English. And I thought it's just one of those things when they tell you to do it, you just feel like, I guess we have to do it, and you don't really question it, because I never had anyone else go through the same experience.
It's very common, especially because like a lot of Sudanese people have gradually moved up north, so it's very common amongst us. I haven't. Coming back to Kansas City, I don't know how to navigate that. And so it was just conversations I've had among our community, but never really figured out what to do with that. There was a large convening. Again, it's through Alive and Well Communities, but we were at an event at the Kaufman Center, and we sat by county at our table, and it was a lot of women who worked in the Park Hill School District, for example. And I told them about this, and they were like very surprised. They didn't even know this was happening. And I'm like, that's interesting to find that out. Like, and I think your point, Deanna, is correct in saying like, you thought you just had to do it. And I think that's the issue. Like a lot of times you just feel like you have to do it because the school tells you that you have to. But which I think in terms of like, that's something we have in common in terms of communities of color too, especially for like, at least our parents, is the like, you need to listen to authority and not really questioning why something's done. But that's not typical for American culture. American culture, like, why am I doing this? There's like the level of outrage is higher for things that are less inconvenient.
Can we talk about that? I mean, I think that's become more visible now, and even having these conversations, that more and more I am starting to realize that a lot of things that I thought I had to do, no one else has had to do, nor have I had anyone question it. And so much of this conversation is happening. Nilufar and Trinidad, do you guys have similar experiences? Anything you can share with us in the group of listeners?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, for me, it's been the struggle, so to speak, has been, the parents' desire for me to integrate into a society. And that integration involves questioning authority. And it's something that's so sort of outside of their perception of how to become part of the community. So the struggle, happens at home, where you're trying to sort of, negotiate and navigate, being in a new space and having a home life and having an outside life and coming into your own identity in a hybrid, hyphenate identity. So all of those things coming together, and I think it's only through experience and sort of like, you know, years of aging that you start to realize, like, I really didn't have to do that. And I'm going to make sure like the next person, whether it's a younger sibling or cousins or whomever it may be, that they kind of know that, right, you know, right out the gate, so they don't have to go through it. But yeah, definitely. And I think it's such a huge part of identity also. And I don't know if anybody else can speak to that as well. You know, the dichotomy of having a home culture and an outside culture and perceived culture and self culture and all of those things.
I would agree. I always have to enter a tagline when I'm introducing myself to like a group or something, always, just because I know the question will come later, so I'll clarify it sooner. I'll say I'm Bengali Mexican American, and I don't always care if they know what I mean by that. It just helps make the conversation faster later. And I think that's one of the most common phrases I've said in my life. And like when I studied a semester in Jordan, right, and I had to learn, you know, Arabic colloquial to get around. One of the first phrases I had to learn, because every taxi driver asked me, where are you from, American? They didn't believe me that I said American. So I had to learn the very specific phrase early on in Arabic. Okay, I'm Ana Amriki Minasul Bengali wa Mexique. I'm American of Mexican and Bengali descent. And it's really this hyper-specific phrase. I said it so much. And so I've noticed I have fun with it now that I've had more experience with it, but there were times in my life where it's been a major point of existential crisis. And I think if people don't know what I'm referring to, they don't know. But people who do know that like this can be a real source of extreme crisis at times in your life. Like, well, who am I exactly? And you're forced to think about it all the time because everyone keeps asking you this stuff. Yeah. Now I have a little more fun with it, but there's times where it's a real mental health issue, you know, in people's lives. Right?
Going off of that, Trinidad, and anyone can chime in, what advice would you give to listeners? Because I've gotten a lot of messages recently from parents who have have kids, teenagers, some even going to college, that have really appreciated some of the conversations we have because it's hit home to where either, you know, we don't talk about a lot of the issues that are happening. But what advice would you give, you know, a teenager right now that's trying to figure out who they are? You know, just like you said, resources, like where do they go? What communities do they talk to, and how do they find that? Especially like if you're living up north, you know, like you said, Nyu Nyu, there isn't a lot of other organizations, you know, where there's more Black people or there's more Mexican American people, or, you know, our voices aren't all there. Like, what would you tell someone if they can't find that?
It's a very hard question. It's a very deep question. Because it's always going to be a little individual, and so I'm hesitant to give the sweeping advice that might not quite apply to someone in the way they see themselves. But the one thing I've noticed is I struggled a lot of my life with cultural identity, and I've noticed when I've talked to people who struggle with identity issues in other ways that I didn't have experience with, I could still empathize a lot more because I've had these serious struggles, and at least having someone to talk to about it that's actually willing to listen to what you're saying. Once I talked to someone about it who had no idea what I was talking about, but he was just empathetic enough to listen, and it was like, you're the first person in years who's actually listened to what I'm trying to describe.
Yeah, I think also for me, I would probably tell the person to trust themselves and trust their own judgment and their own, you know, process of getting to their identity. Because the issue too, which I'm glad that we're having this discussion, because it kind of relates to the anti-Blackness thing. So as BIPOC, you know, like Indigenous and Black and communities of color, there's, you know, the white supremacy is still like on the outside putting a lot of pressure on us. So and I think the way that pressure looks like sometimes is trying to put us into boxes, and we do it ourselves too in our own communities and throughout like different communities of color. And like, you know, your like Trinidad, your identity, for example, is a good example of that. Like, you having to navigate so many different spaces. But if we didn't have these constructs of like race and things like that, I don't think it'd be as important. But it is at this moment, and so you have to be like, you know, what do I like, who do I believe I am, and focus on that, but also make sure you're educating yourself, and that you're not doing this in ways that could hurt your community as well. You're not trying to denounce the things that make the cultures that you're a part of. My family's mainly South Sudanese, but my mom is half Liberian and South Sudanese, and like for her, she doesn't really, which is funny because she's like more half. So I think for me, I feel like she's very secure in her identity in terms of like she grew up in South Sudan and that's the culture she's a part of, especially because in a lot of cultures in Africa, and even across the world, you go by what, like, your father. Everything's like patrilineal. But for me, what I noticed that in the communities that we grew up here, sometimes they try to like other my mom or other me, like even though you guys don't know what Sudanese people may or may not look like, I don't fit the typical look. So sometimes I get assumed to be Black American by Sudanese people. And then like, yeah, but because I don't look exactly the same too, like they bring that up more than I would bring up. And I got to like, I didn't take it to a place where, to be like, to take, like internalize that fact. I knew that, this is the culture I grew up, this is a culture that I'm a part of. But also I think it's important to make sure that you're not othering that community too, because that's where the anti-Blackness comes into play. Like, because South Sudanese people are darker. So there's even people that are darker than me. I could have been the person who was like, I'm lighter and all that kind of stuff. But like, that's the thing. We don't want to, we're not trying to do that. We don't want to do that kind of stuff. And colorism is something that a lot of things we've talked about today is like, that's something that also ties a lot of us in this podcast and all these communities of colors together. It's colorism. And like, that's part of the anti-Blackness that is really important that we need to discuss as well.
Before we get into Samantha's story real quick, can we go around and just talk about what everyone feels in regards to those words, anti-Blackness, because this is what this series is about. Like, Nilufar, will you start with that conversation?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to sort of explore from the perspective of young immigrant life, and to reflect back, I think is a little bit of a luxury, to be at the age that I am and reflect back to, the information that, let's say, the generation before me had accessible to them, and, maybe the laziness that they had in not exploring more. But yeah, the anti-Blackness sentiment, I feel like it's reflective of each immigrant community's own issues with colorism, whether it's, anti-regional, culture, behavior, whether it's, classist behavior. All those things are sort of very much so integrated into language and into their own idea of how to self-identify with the dominant culture as they see it. And so I think the cool part about being, a little bit the in-between kid, the kid who had to like learn a language and like explore the environment, is that all those things are so immediately available, that they're just so upfront. You just immediately have a sense of anti-Blackness in the greater community. You have this idea, but I think the difficult conversation comes into home life, because I think a lot of immigrant kids, and just generally a lot of immigrants, are constantly in this, again, negotiation or struggle of how to maintain both sides of their identities and keep people happy. How to keep the home life, the home language, the home culture happy, how to keep, their own identity going, and how to keep, sort of, let's say, the outside world happy or at ease. So I think those conversations can be had. And I think the only way we can have them is just to like immediately ask, well, what do you mean? Or why are you saying that? Or what is that supposed to be? Or, just to very quickly kind of call people out on it. Now that person might be, grandma, that person might be cousin so-and-so, or it might be a friend. But I think as soon as that conversation is had, then we're actually in conversation and moving forward. So yeah, and I have experienced it, and there were times that I was, too young to know how to address it. And then there were other times that I was just checked out and didn't want to deal with it. It was too stressful. But I think we're in a moment right now that we have an opportunity to really work and to really educate and to also, you know, just kind of put up the boundaries of like, no, like I'm not gonna show up for that. I'm not gonna be present for that conversation. You know, you may lose me at family events, and that's where we're at, and we're just gonna kind of move forward from there. So that's kind of where I'm at today with it. But I also am aware that it takes support to get there as well. Support from like-minded folks, support from friends, and right now I think we have a supportive, you know, community that's beyond our immediate environment to have these conversations.
Yeah, I agree so much. And I know Alex brought up a great point about the conversations in our last podcast on how to do that in a way where, because we all love our abuelos, you know, that we all know in their heart they're amazing, beautiful people. And it's generations of racism, you know, just the different thinking. And there were some great tips on how to come about those conversations, especially for younger people as well. Trinidad, do you have some comments in regards to the anti-Blackness?
I'll just briefly frame it because a lot of my work is, you know, immigrant refugee issues, larger global migration crisis, and world history, right? And by the way, I got Samantha calling into my phone so we can have her on speaker when it's her turn because her camera, she kept losing internet. So when back in 2014, when I was in Jordan, you know, outside of class time, I had a chance to go volunteer a bit. And, you know, in Jordan, you're around refugees all the time. There's tons of Syrian refugees. They're on the bus with me when I go to school. Well, I'd heard a little bit there were other refugee groups, but I just never saw them. And then I got to volunteer with a group, and it was on just a different part of town than whatever we usually went to for my classes. And it turned out there's just tons of Somali and Sudanese refugees all in this one area. And on the other end of Amman that I normally would never go to. Amman's the capital. It's a really big city like New York. And they're all there, and the school was overwhelmed. And that was interesting to me because I never thought about what it was like to see how do Arabs talk about African people, Somalis, Sudanese, because there's a lot of people there. And I was a little surprised to find that even there's like a debate about, do you call them black or not? And it was interesting to me because I heard like the same debates here at times, and I just had never thought about how do people in different parts of the world think about these conversations. I don't want to say more on that because I think it's more. I want to let those more affected by all these issues be able to speak for themselves on. I'm just saying my perspective, seeing the global conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Nunu, if you want to just briefly talk about that a little bit too, and then we'll get Samantha back on.
Yes, a lot of my family members had talked about that experience because, like, I myself wasn't born in South Sudan. For that, a lot of people in my generation weren't because of conflict, right? And so a lot of them, if they weren't born in like Uganda, they were born in Ethiopia, and a lot of them had to go to refugee camps in the neighboring countries, and then also including Egypt. And a lot of my family members had very negative experiences in Egypt, and to this day it's still an issue because of anti-Blackness, and because, you know, South Sudan being at the equator, we are one of the darkest people in the world, and so it adds another layer to the anti-Blackness, and so for our people it's very difficult, you know, and like trying to interact and navigate with other cultures, especially when it's like apparently you kind of see, I don't know, like raising up lighter complexions and things like that. It makes it harder to kind of see like, are we safe to be around people? And I think it's only when we've come to the United States that we see so much of a commonality that those relationships happen. So like we lived in public housing in the Northeast, and so obviously, like, that was our community, and so whoever lived there was part of it. And so I think from those relationships, that's how we've been able to interact with other communities, and that's kind of like how our families have been able to kind of like you know, kind of heal from it, just because they don't have to deal with people who are always causing them distress. So it's different to deal with someone who is Egyptian in the United States and to deal with them in Egypt, where, you know, in the United States, like, we're all trying to deal with the racism and the, you know, and the poverty and all those things. and that's kind of what brings us together. Like that's how I've come to know a lot of the communities of color, because we were just there together dealing with the same struggles, and that's what brings us that's what brought us together. And just to see like the patterns and like your all experiences is similar to mine. And I don't know how old you guys are, but it seems like around the same age range or same generation. And so we're going through the same idea of like, this is my culture, but I've been raised in America, and like we're like the link between the two different worlds. And to see that pattern, no matter where someone comes from in what country someone comes from, is amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nunu, for sharing that. Do we want to go ahead and get Samantha on now, Trinidad?
Okay. I wonder, does this work? Can you see her on FaceTime?
Okay, right there, right?
Wait, I can't hold it up here.
Okay, there you go. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself now.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Samantha. I'm sorry, I was having connectivity issues. I am originally from Kenya. I migrated here as a child in 2004 to come and be with family, and also just to continue education, the American dream as it's called. And so when I did move here, I went to elementary school. It was a transition. So basically, like anyone that knows that's gone to school here as a young child, you can get picked on, but when you're a person of color from a different country, there are different things that, kids pick on, because you might look a little different or sound a little different. So I dealt with that, which I would call that innocent ignorance that you learn from, it has to come from somewhere. You learn from home. So kids don't know, that they're being super mean, and we don't understand a lot at that age. Now, once I got past that, it continued in high school. I had a hard time just dealing with the fact that I'm a little bit different people. My family at home culture was a little bit different. Discipline had to learn how to stop calling people Mr. and Mrs. a lot. They preferred their first names instead. Certain things I couldn't do just because my culture was different from others. Now, I made it through school, graduated high school, got into college. It's only until a couple of years ago, and that's not really a couple of years ago, it's more so last year. I'll give you a backstory as far as like my DACA is what I'm under. And, when I found out the DACA was available and that I could get on it, I jumped on it. I was like, yes, please. I want to be able to do everything the right way. I want to be able to go to college. I want to be able to work. And I have kids, so I want to be able to, provide for them. And it was a situation I felt really blessed. I'm really big on doing the right way and not taking the easy route out. And that seemed like the right way for me. So I did it. I've been on it for years. Until last year is when I had problems with that. So I went through a battle for my oldest daughter, and in the middle of that, when it can get messy. So the opposing side, was trying to grasp at straws during the end, and one particular chose to pick on immigration status at the time because I had knee surgery October of 2018, which put me on bed rest. My job knew about my DACA lapse in November of 2018. My HR department called me. They said, hey, lapsing, but you're on short ability. It's technically not working. It's okay. Wait until you get back to work. Raise that 825, and you can go ahead and renew it. So I'm thinking that's great, but during the battle, I never thought that's something that they would bring up. But since they needed to use something, there's really not much that they could pull from. They went ahead and found an insurance ticket. It's on my record. They found an insurance ticket from 2017. Mind you, we were in 2019. That was being sent to an old address. So I had no notification of that. And so, you know, if anyone knows with insurance tickets and such, you know, if you're not getting the notifications, they'll issue like a ban. So I didn't know anything about that, but when they brought it up in court, I was like, okay, so what can I do to take care of it? And since they saw this as an opportunity, they didn't give me a chance to do anything. So they detained me in Clay County. And then when they detained me in Clay County, the ticket was from Grandview. They took me to Grandview, but the ticket was so minuscule to the judge didn't even see me. He was like, okay, I understand. Here's a fine. Just pay that. There's not going to be any points, you know, to your driver's license. Pay the fine, and you can go on about your. I'm like, okay, great, perfect. I was freaking out. Jail is not for me. And so when I think I'm free to go, officer at Grandview informed me, you're not free to go. You have an ICE hold. So I start freaking out a little bit more. I'm like, what do you mean? I've never, you know, come in contact with ICE. I don't even know what that means. And he's like, well, just wait for them to get here. They just want to ask you some questions. He's like, about your DACA. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's expired, but okay, yeah. So I'll wait about 3 hours. Mind you, if it was just Grandview, I would have been out by then. They get there, and the two officers, which I'm pretty sure if you guys watch any of the videos, like Enzo's video and stuff, it's the same too. They come, they ask, the first question is, do you know you're fired? And it laughs. I'm like, yes, of course I do. I had surgery, you know, it was a financial situation. They're like, oh, okay, we see financial hardships all the time. So I'm thinking, okay, good, they understand. No, I was wrong. So after they say that, they said that they're going to keep me in handcuffs and transfer me down to their main headquarters for more questioning. So, you know, I'm trying to think to myself, okay, what else is there? You know, I thought this was just so simple. I ride all the way down there to a building called the World Euro, which is sublease with another company. They get me there, and they're starting asking questions about my mom's first and last name, address, phone number, my kids' first and last name, address, phone number to where they can be reached. Well, that's not relevant with my case. I need to provide that information. So, sorry, I still shake from it, but, you know, it got to the point where they took that as non-cooperation, and on top of the fact that I refused to sign anything without people present, and they wrote fine on each one of my paperwork signature lines, and told me that I get no bond because I did not cooperate when it came to the question, which the exact words were, you did great questions at first, but now since you're not giving the questions that you want, that's non-cooperation, so you don't get a bond. They then transferred me to Caldwell County, which is in the middle of Kingston, Missouri. I didn't even know where it's located. The best way I can make a connection with Caldwell County with people who are on the outside world, if they watch the news, the same jail that was holding the guy that was a suspect for the 2 Wisconsin missing boys. And I was in the cell right next to him. Took a shower in a pod right next to him. This was a detention center full of federal inmates, full of people who didn't like people with my skin color. That's been something that's been hard for me to wrap my head around ever since I moved here. I can wrap my head around somebody not liking someone for their skin color. And then while I was in there, the lady that was from Clay took it upon herself to travel all the way down from Clay County to Kingston to visit me without me knowing, try to question me about things that were not even relevant to my case. And she asked me how I came to the United States. And I was like, well, I said family brought me. It kept very vague. Well, I then get out, thank God, to the DVLN and AirKC at the lowest bond, which was $1,500. Most people don't know that ICE doesn't have a 10% cleaner like most jails. Pay the full amount straight out. And I got the lowest bond. Their average bond for ICE is $10,000 full. Okay, I watched a Nigerian lady come in there with a $7,500 bond. She thought it was $750. You know, I came in there with a Guatemalan girl who barely spoke any English. Came in there after her, got a court date before her, was released before her. And I know what her charges are. She didn't deserve that, but since she didn't speak English as well, they did that to her. They pulled her out to even ask her if she wanted to be voluntarily removed. So they prey on people losing hope, being in there for so long that they're just like, you know what, just send me back. They prey on the fact that, you know, you don't know your rights. They move really quickly, you know, and the thing is, you think about this, like, sent back without any food and maybe the clothes on your back, you know, you might not even know the country you're going back to anymore. So that happened, and finally when I get out, I go and I have another court case for a custody case, and this man had an email forwarded to me that this lady sent to like the children's division team, and she says at the end of the email, after tearing my cousin's home studies apart because there was of her marriage left off of there that apparently was relevant to the case, which was, she puts in the email, she says, a general question. When we went to visit Miss at Caldwell County, she mentioned that family members brought her here. I would like to know exactly who brought her here. Mind you, the judge had already told her in the middle of a court proceeding that had no relevancy to my case, but she took it upon herself to hope that I would get deported and I would lose my child. I can just I can't wrap my mind around that. You know, I lost my job at that time. My boss tried to fight for me so hard to keep my job, but I was literally one day, I got out the day after he could hold it. I lost my car. I almost lost my apartment. You know, for a while I had to live, you know, with people who I have in my support system, and then I just now got back in my own place. Just now got back on my own feet with the help of these organizations. But that's not even the worst story. My story is not the worst story. So I can only imagine what's happening to people who have these resources, who don't know how to stay strong. You know, they don't have the support system around them to stay strong. With the Black Lives Matter, I feel like people are having more of an uproar because this media hearsay, you know, it's not shooting, you see a 15-second on that you can poke holes in and say, okay, well, did this person do wrong? We didn't see the story. This video is causing such a big uproar because you saw beginning to end someone being handcuffed, not kicking, not screaming, other than for their life, and then watch that person's life end right in front of you. So I think that the reason that people are making such a big uproar is because they cannot put holes in this, and they need to be able to see this in other views. What if that was an immigrant? Because that does happen to immigrants, you know? That does happen to Black people in the community. It's worse when you're a Black person in the community and you're an immigrant. That's just a double negative right there, apparently. So I feel like people just need to pay attention. They need to go vote if they can. Talk to the legislature, get things changed for the better, and just continue doing peaceful protest. But I don't think it should stop here just for Black Lives Matter. I think it should just continue for us to change with how inhumane somehow this country is.
Trinidad, did it go?
I think she just finished her thing.
Samantha, thank you so much. I mean, I don't even have words. I'm like got goosebumps and just I don't even have words to say at this point because I'm sorry. And I think the work that Trinidad does and the work that so many DACA that they do to help support. I myself am learning because I think I've told this time before, my dad was undocumented and my grandparents were, but we don't talk about it. It's always just been a hidden secret. You just live your life like a normal American. So you're never seen or thought of any differently. And to know that, this is happening and the severity of it and that no one even cares. Like, no, there's so many people that just don't care. That it's like, how do you how do you change this? How do you do something? I know there's so many people doing stuff right now, but I mean, Trinidad, maybe you can talk a little bit more about what you all are doing, like just like supporting Samantha.
I wish I could find a way to keep us both in the camera at the same time.
Like right here on your shoulder. There you go. Perfect.
My hand's gonna get tired if I do that though. I'll hold her camera back up if she wants to say something too. Okay. Samantha's story is one of the more, to me, kind of amazing stories that I can think of in our area. Not a lot of people have heard it because it just touches on so many different racial issues all at the same time. And I was wondering, were you all able to hear everything she said? It sounded like sometimes it sounded good, but she was, what could have started as a simple like situation in court, it could have been resolved easily. Basically, someone racially profiled her and wanted to find more excuses to say, well, she must be an irresponsible mother. She's making up this narrative and taking it to very far extremes. It just touches on a lot of hurtful things. And I think some people in our area here who maybe haven't seen abuse that bad, even those microaggressions we felt being people who don't look like the majority, it kind of like hurts us because that tells us this happened in our area. And it's like something in me says, what if someone wanted to do that to me? They could basically get away with it if we didn't have a support network, right? And Samantha pointed out that there are still other people being held by ICE, including in our area. And the last time when I was here, we talked about universal rep a bit and why we really need universal rep or the move toward universal rep for all immigration cases, because most immigrants, if they have to deal with the immigration legal system, they can't afford a lawyer, an immigration lawyer. And because immigration law is civil law, not criminal law. And the classic concern we always have is, since it's not criminal law, why do we treat them like criminals and already just assume they should be in detention because there was like some minor violation of immigration law or perceived violation of, right? You have to wait all that time. And for Samantha, it got to the point where she was required to go to another municipal court date while she was still in ICE detention. And we got stressed because if we didn't get her out soon, then within 2 weeks from that point when we found out about it, she could have missed her next municipal court date and it could have been really bad. And it just astounded me that they would keep, it almost felt like they were doing it on purpose, like scheduling all these at the same time, like what? So as we mentioned before in the podcast about universal rep, there is, I think, about 7 or more major different county jails that ICE uses in our area. So we're weird because there's not one set ICE detention facility like in other cities. Like in Denver, they have a geo group, and I've been to that one. I've been to the one in Tacoma. There's one set facility, and no one likes it. But I guess technically the advantage as an advocate is anytime you're trying to advocate for an immigrant's case and you know they're detained, you know exactly where they are. Here it's really confusing because, we get a call from my family member got detained by ICE. Well, we always have to go through the whole process. Do you have their A number? Because we really need that to look up where they're actually being held in our area, because all these different county jails are all over an hour away in any direction from Kansas City. And then you want to go visit your family, you have to maybe drive an hour and a half, and it just gets really confusing. And then maybe if you're hopefully through the advocacy of AIR and through the DDLN and other groups, you can hopefully secure a bond to get your family member out. But I've sometimes wondered, and sometimes we're able to use the bond funds to help that too. But I've known of families who would just go ahead and get the bond taken care of before they knew there was a bond fund they could ask for help. And I would wonder, how did you get $10,000 out of nowhere? And it's a really this is a really stressful process for people. And the cost is one of my friends who was in one of these detention centers in our area for several months. I mean, when she finally got bonded out, she told me her family didn't visit her the whole time because they didn't feel safe to come, right? So she was alone the whole time. Then you finally get out and you have to try to get your life back together, but there was no one in the system that was particularly sympathetic to what you just went through. You're facing eviction from your apartment now because you haven't been able to afford the rent yet, and it's hard to explain to your landlord, well, here's what happened to me, why it's been hard to just randomly suddenly get more money again. and people don't know about these situations. It's hard to explain. I've had to help advocate for these things before to landlords too. It's always so confusing and really stressful, and it happens in our area. In here, right here, you know, part of our area is Johnson County. It's one of the richest counties in the country. Why does this happen to people in such rich areas, right? So inequality hits people where we live in a magical Joko land where we don't think we have to have problems, but there are a lot of problems, including in the whole Kansas City area. Yeah. Sorry, it got me emotional. Right?
No, I think this is exactly what we need to hear. Just Trinidad, just for people who, just get their information from the news or, social media, who is ICE?
Oh,
immigrant. So that way we hear it from somebody who's in it, doing it. You're not hearing it from, the news, and
sure.
You tell us who they are.
That's fair. So Immigration Customs Enforcement, they're symbolic of our current state of how we use immigration enforcement. And that's a lot of that's traceable to changes that happened after 9/11 because everyone got freaked out about our border policies. And I know I'm going to respond real quick. I know there's lots of people well-intentioned. There was a point where I thought like this until I really realized, oh, there's almost no cases of great cases of ICE interacting with people. It's almost always abuse. Mm-hmm. So that's where the abolish ICE line comes from. Kind of like defund police. There's no compromising with them. They've never shown they're willing to actually compromise on these issues. They just they're like cowboys. There's not a lot of oversight over what they do. So if they do an abuse, they don't really have to answer to anyone except the president. So that's hard to work for local accountability for them because they're a federal organization who kind of feels like they could do what they want. And the only limitation they have is just their manpower. So ICE is, they're not, I'm usually the kind of person I want to say I want to dialogue with people. I want to give people a chance. We've tried that before. You can't really dialogue with them. They don't really care. They're not really sympathetic to the plight of immigrants. They just think we got to enforce the laws. Well, the problem is all of our immigration laws don't make sense. And deportation orders out of our Kansas City Immigration Court, they've quadrupled in this administration. They're completely out of control, and lots of people, including Latino communities, end up over a minor traffic violation. Really small violations end up getting reported to ICE, and then suddenly they're in ICE detention, and maybe they're getting deported and separated from their families. And Samantha was lucky in this case, right? In a sense, and some people don't get that luck.
Trinidad, what I think is so interesting is that, Samantha, I think I'm happy that she was able to share her story because it shows you right there, the way that, we're all going through the same experiences, but in terms of how it's being portrayed in the media, they're siloed. So then immigration ends up especially, I noticed even when growing up here, it didn't used to be that we were portraying Latinx people, or especially Mexicans, as being in relation to immigration issues, but more and more these days has been the case. And so it's they're getting criminalized in that way, and then Black people are being criminalized in another way. And I feel like it's more of a divide and conquer. So if we don't see each other, if we don't see ourselves in each other's struggles, then we don't care to deal with it. And I think that's the main problem, because it does relate back to Black Lives Matter, because it's the same issue we're talking about. Racism is all about power. And in these cases, people don't have any power to do anything to advocate for themselves. And the things that they're even getting criminalized for are such small things. And so in terms of anti-Blackness in discussions of immigration, I think the way it works too is race is used to divide us, and so we don't see that we're dealing with the same problems. And so I guess where do we go from here to see that Black Lives Matter is in everyone's self-interest, because everyone's dying in the hands of the police, and the immigration is in everyone's interest, because it's just going to keep going from, if it's not you today, it's going to be you tomorrow. And so we have to figure out ways to kind of connect those stories.
Yeah, I agree 110%. I love the way you put that because that is exactly what's happening here. And the power that people have is so, it's scary. I'm going to be flat out. I mean, even walking out your door, even in the skin color I'm in, people, colorism, that's a whole other issue too. My oldest son is a lot darker than I am and does get targeted more so because he is. And you just don't know if your kids are ever going to come home just because of the fact that someone has power over you to do what they want. And I feel like that's run rampant almost, even more so now. And Trinidad talking about ICE in that manner, that's exactly what I think our viewers need to hear, is that truth of, they're just a group of people that are non-negotiable, right? They will do what they want to do at the biggest power they can. And we need to ensure that we can support them, and like you all are doing.
To me, the worst part is even as they're abusing people, they'll be polite about it. I've seen how they talk about it. They'll act really polite and civil about it. Well, we're just enforcing the policy. But you're like separating their family.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll kind of open up the floor to anyone that has any other comments or wants to talk about any other issues around anti-Blackness, immigration, ICE, detention centers. I know, Trinidad, you might have some more information about that as well, because I feel like our listeners, especially with comments that are coming back, they're really wanting to know more and hopefully getting more understanding of what is happening, in our world right now.
You want to know more about the ICE detention centers in the area? Or? What?
We're going to continue talking a little bit more about the detention centers, and I think that's what we were going to talk about, Trinidad. Maybe I was wrong.
Oh, sure. Do you want to share more of your experience, Samantha, about being there? Or?
Sure. Sorry, guys, I had to move to my car, by the way. So basically, with the detention centers, let me know if you can hear me. Okay. With the detention centers, it's just, there's a reason they put them in the middle of nowhere. So you can be as far away from the city and getting counsel. Let's say you get counsel and all of a sudden your lawyer can't drive to the middle of nowhere. It takes longer for them to put things together. And that plays a part in what I was saying earlier with losing hope, that's their way of kind of cutting you down piece by piece to the point where you're just like, okay, I give up. And with the detention centers as well, the ICE agents, speaking specifically on them, I've been asking, like when I first went and I was at their headquarters, the ICE agent looks me straight in the face and asks me, what border did you cross? I stated to him, I didn't cross a border. I flew here. I kind of had a blank stare in my face. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And he goes, no, you didn't. I said, yes, I did. I flew here. You can see my passport. I'm under DACA. My passport is stamped. I got checked in Mississippi with Border and Customs. Well, it's not in our system. So, and I'm like, okay. After that, I'm not about to argue. I'm not going to, try to go back and forth. I feel like that would have made matters worse. So I just said, okay. And then on Mondays at the detention centers, an ICE agent is supposed to come and answer questions for everyone. They don't. They come, they ask you what your name is, they look at your court case number, or you give them your alien number, and they say, well, we have nothing to do. Check back on the phone if you want to find out more. The only thing that got me the favor that I got as far as the blessing of being able to get my court date within those 10 days that they do have to set you up with a bond hearing is the fact that I was able to speak up after I saw the Guatemalan girl get taken out past those 10 days to be asked if she wants to see a judge. That is a piece of paper that they give to you when you first get taken into their headquarters. The same one they wrote refuse to sign on. Just me refusing to sign does not mean that I do not want to see a judge. And that does not, negate the fact that, I didn't acknowledge I wanted to see a judge. Okay, so with that being said, when the ICE agent came I said, okay, I saw you pull her out to ask her if she wanted to see a judge. You guys have 10 days to let somebody get counsel. And even if they don't have counsel, within those 10 days, you're still supposed to grant them a bond hearing. Please do not do to me what you just did to her. I am acknowledging now that I want to see a judge, and I acknowledged before that I want to see a judge. He goes, oh, you're an immigrant? I said, yes, I am. Apparently, I don't fit the stereotypical mold of an immigrant. And on top of that, tells me I'm going to, get my court date soon, checking the phone. I got a court date before her. Just because I was able to know the rights and I was able to speak up, that's not fair at all. And then whenever, I go to have my court hearing, I'm sitting there, my family, the community, they backed me, they wrote letters, they wrote character references. The judge was able to see everything about me. Anything that they could pull dirt on, they pulled dirt on. But the judge still wanted to let me out on a signature bond, meaning you don't pay anything, you sign yourself out, you go. The ICE attorney, during my bond hearing, tells the judge, you cannot do that. You cannot sign her out with no bond. This is a federal judge. And an attorney for ICE has enough authority somehow to tell a judge, you can't sign somebody out on their own recognizance. Even though their piece of paperwork that for ICE that they give you, their options for release are on your own recognizance with special needs, with a bond, or you just don't have one. So my lawyer, thank God, that works for the DDLN and volunteers for them, does this pro bono, mind you, was ready to fight that. But the judge said, okay, fine. If I can't give her no bond for her to be able to sign herself out, then I'll give her the lowest bond possible. And if she's not able to get out on that low bond and her family's not able to afford it and get her out in time, we're going to have another court date and we're going to revisit this signature bond. The attorney did not want to hear that. He wanted to give the judge as many things to say, well, this is why you cannot. And my attorney saying, this is why you can. It's been done in other states. So that's not valid. So just for things like that to happen shows how ICE operates, shows the authority that they abuse. Because who sits, you can't go into a regular, traffic ticket court and the judge says, well, I want you to pay this fine. And then for a lawyer to come up and say, no, you can't do that. You can't tell them to do that. That would be, you'd be held in contempt of court. But that's not what happened there. So that's just how they operate. And with the fact of moving so quickly, with Crescenzo's case, busting out someone's window, dragging them out, and then he was deported literally, I think, a day or two after that with no notification to his family, which ICE is supposed to notify the family, just for the main reason of having somebody's family give them clothes to take with them, to tell them goodbye. Crescenzo's family didn't even find out he was gone until somebody that was in the same, cell, with him called his family and let them know, because on the system it still showed that he was still being held. So he went with only the clothes on his back, no money, no nothing. So that gives you kind of a background on how they operate. It's simple, and this isn't like a fact-finding mission as far as I think this happened. These are things that actually did happen. And then on Black Lives Matter, for somebody to see and look at me and say, well, I didn't know you were an immigrant, or you speak very well for an African-American. And then when they find out I'm not African-American, they say, oh, that's why. You can't keep putting people in these stereotypes. A person is a person, regardless of their skin color, regardless of how they talk. So you should not be able to treat them differently just because of their background, their ethnicity. We fought so much for equality in different aspects of just human life. So what makes it different fighting for equality for someone's skin color to the next person? That's just my stance on it. Just because there's just been so many things that I wish I could speak up. I used to be afraid on speaking up just out of fear of retaliation. But after that detention center incident, I was like, enough is enough. I'm so tired of watching the news and going, oh, that's so sad, turning it off and forgetting about it, and then jumping onto the next news story. I mean, somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to do it, because the bad people spewing hate on Facebook and out here saying how they're, bigots and they hate people of color and they hate this and they hate that. They're not scared. They're not afraid of the consequences. So why should the good people, be driven by fear of retaliation and sit back while they run rampant? It's just unacceptable. So it takes one person regardless of what's going to happen, it takes one person at a time. If that person falls, you pick them back up and we keep going.
No, it definitely takes people like you, Samantha, having the courage and, to be able to do this and to be able to share your story, because we all need to hear it. This is how we get educated, and this is how we can hopefully help you and help so many more, and help Trinidad and help the many that are helping, everybody in these situations to figure out, what can we do better to support you and support these efforts. Trinidad, is there anything going on now or support ways for us to support what you're doing and helping, even volunteers? I don't know. You tell us what it is that you need from us.
Oh, well, I always love when people are willing to listen. That's one thing, when we all listen to each other's experiences. That, to me, that's baseline. But if like in the local area here, people trying to get involved in some of the immigration advocacy work in the network here, you can consider coming to the AIR network meetings, which are on the 4th Mondays, and that's a good way to start plugging in. And a lot of things, the more you keep coming, the more you build the trust, and more we're going to try to get you onto leadership positions in various ways, right? I think AIR knows a lot of the immigration groups in this area, so there's other kinds of work that you'd be good at in helping with the immigrant cause here. We could probably plug you into whatever group you might be a good fit for. Also, a lot of groups right now could use help with fundraising, donations, to keep up all this work. Those are some of the major things that come to my mind. Maybe consider writing into the Supreme Court right now to ask them to please have justice for DACA. I've checked, you can't send an email about public comment to the Supreme Court. You can only write in. So write it in now, because people are going to suffer if we lose DACA. Yeah.
So that would be Supreme Court.
Yeah, you can look up Supreme Court .gov, the address to send to. Yeah. So there's lots of ways to get involved. I think I'm interested in also getting the conversations moving forward. Like Nyu Nyu was saying, is we're realizing a lot of these struggles are basically that they're at the heart. They're not different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're a little distinct, but they're not different. Right. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that, Nyu Nyu.
I think in terms of, especially with the pandemic and all these things that are going on, I think we really need to dream big in terms of how do we want to transform our society? And one of those ways is that we need to defund the things that are killing us, and things like ICE, things like the police, or the types of things that we need to be moving in that direction. Those do not keep communities of color, Black communities, Indigenous communities safe at all. And I think we need to have the courage to be able to speak up on those things, because while they may sound radical, they're not really that radical. We are just asking for our humanity and to be able to, enjoy our lives. And we don't have that right now. None of us do, especially Black folks. And that is what Black folks are speaking on. We, Black people right now, we don't even have humanity. Our bodies have been seen on screens and looked, and then still somehow we are debating on what actually happened, as if someone did not get murdered. And I think if we're tolerating that kind of stuff, where could we even go from there? That's just totally inhumane. And I think we have to think about how this country is being run, how our systems are at play, and it does not work for everyone. It does not work for our communities. It doesn't work for the United States. And we need to have that kind of conversation. I should never have existed in the first place. And that's the same thing. And if we look at the history of the police, it's there to protect property. It was there to catch slaves. These things are not made for people like us. People like us were never supposed to have the power to vote and all those things. And we have it now. So we need to push on from there. That's where I'm at with all those kinds of things.
Thank you, Nyu Nyu, so much. And thank you for sharing your own story and, what you're dealing with right now. And hopefully we can figure out a way to support you and even have get support for others, up here, up in this North area and other places for support systems, that are filled with people with the same voices together. Nilufar, do you have any last words you want to tell the community?
Sure. I'm just echoing what everybody else has said. I'm greatly appreciative of all the stories shared and of the conversation that we're having. I know for me personally, learning more about the state of Black immigration and immigrants has been really useful. There's a Black Alliance for Just Immigration, or BAJI, that has a report out about deportations in the Black immigrant community and the criminalization of immigration for the Black community, how they're more vulnerable than other communities in some situations. So that's been really useful. And ultimately, I think, there's a national movement right now. We're kind of in this moment of transformation. And I think it's an opportunity for the immigrant community to also understand that immigration is a Black issue. And when we say, defund and abolition, what that really means for all of us as the greater immigrant community, and how we can show up for the Black community in our own areas, in our lives, having these difficult conversations, and ultimately being. There's a lot of poetry, music, and art that can motivate and we can learn from. And so all that is available to us right now. It's just a matter of knowing that we are in community and we can remain in community, and to come out of the shadows for people who've been either fearful or unaware, or, whatever's been the hesitation for them. I think this is a time to show up and support each other.
Absolutely. I appreciate you being here and being a part of this conversation, co-hosting with me. It means a lot. I love hanging out with you, and just being around your amazing positive energy is amazing. So I appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I've learned so much by listening, so I'm really grateful.
I think we're all learning. I'm still trying to figure out how to do this podcast thing, but just getting the voices out here. You all make the show. So, and that's what needs to happen here, and using the platform to ensure that all the voices are here. But Samantha and Trinidad, I want to give you guys a chance to say some last words to the community, please.
Do you want to go, Samantha?
You can go first. That's fine.
Oh, I was hoping you had something so I could. I feel emotional right now. We had talked a lot about very hard topics, and actually I talk about these topics a lot, and it still made me emotional. This is a really hard time for everyone, right? And if anyone had heard some of these issues talked about today and weren't comfortable with it, it's okay to not be comfortable with it. But then if you're not comfortable with it, but then you don't want to talk about it or listen anymore, that doesn't help anything. If you're not comfortable with it, but you're willing to keep listening and see how do we actually move forward to our next steps as a society that does not abuse people because they're Black, or because they're immigrants, or because they're Black immigrants. Like, we need to move these things forward, yeah. And it can't happen unless we actually talk about it and take some real action.
Okay, so basically what I want to say is just put back off of just not being conflicted of just when the media shows something, you get surprised by it, and then all of a sudden when it's on to the next story, it's forgotten. When it comes down to it, this thing going on with ICE, the Black Lives Matter, I've seen both things go in the media. There's an uproar, and then it dies out. People forget about it. It's not a big deal, and that's not what needs to happen this time. People need to actually keep it in mind, keep the same energy as people say, and go out there and actually make a change, because we can actually, every protest, everything that has been changed in this country, everything that has been for the better, I should say, took a lot of work, took some persistence, and took a lot of love. Let's not forget that, because we cannot fight hate with hate. We got to fight it with love. As hard as it may be, you can love from a distance. I've always learned that. So even if somebody is, spewing hate, just be like, I love you, but I love you from over there. I'm going to continue to fight for what's right. And that's just my stance on it. And I feel like everyone should follow suit with peacefully protesting. I feel like everyone should let the politicians know what they're thinking. Definitely the Supreme Court. Thank you, Trinidad, for reminding me about that. I've been trying to keep it out of mind, so I don't have a lot of anxiety about it. Because, yeah, if DACA went away, it would put a lot of people in harm's way. A lot.
Well, I just want to thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Nyu Nyu, for being so vulnerable and sharing your amazing stories. People need to hear these stories. And like you said, Samantha, absolutely. We need to continue talking about it. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, get uncomfortable, because this is exactly what needs to happen to keep these voices, here and heard. And I just want to appreciate all of you for taking the time to do this today. I know we went over like 15 minutes and taking your evening, but I know this is such an important topic. And I love Trinidad. Thank you for getting emotional. I know I've been on a couple of calls with you, and I love that you. It's sometimes it just happens, and I think we all are feeling that right now. I did that a little bit with Alex the other day, just because you see friends and you see family, and I thank you, Samantha, so much. I'm just so glad that you agreed to do this, and I appreciate that. And Nyu Nyu too, thank you so much. So thank you all. I appreciate you being here, and hopefully we'll see you guys here again soon to share more stories. I know I had Trinidad on for a little bit, and Deoslin has a little bit of goodbye. She said, all wonderful stories and great information on these issues. Thank you all for all you do. And Nyu Nyu and Samantha, thank you so much for sharing with us your stories, because Deoslin and Alex put this together, and I appreciate them so much for doing that. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
No way.